Welcome, guys, back to the I Love Wrestling podcast. I'm your host, as always, Justin Woolwine, and today we are welcome with TNA Superstar, Mr. Brian Myers. How we doing, man?
What's up, man? Thanks for having me on.
Uh, like I told you off air, I'm a big fan of yours, big inspiration, especially for podcasting. I really like what you and Cardona have
Awesome.
done. So thank you for kind of leading the way for guys like me.
Awesome.
I'm going to dive right into questions here. It was really interesting going over your career, seeing how things kind of laid out with WWE. After, being cut in 2020 in that crazy time, what went into your decision to come to Impact?
It's funny. It's just always leads back to my what I call my pro wrestling dad, Tommy Dreamer. I mean, the Good Brothers are two of my best friends, so I knew that they were going to TNA, but I didn't give it much thought. And then Tommy kind of reached out and said, "What would you think?" kind of thing. And I said, "You know what? Let's rock." And Tommy hired me when I was 20 years old in WWE the first time. He offered me this job in TNA. I've been here for over 5 years now, and it was one of the best decisions I've ever made in my life. Just really life altering, if you will. So almost like you're devastated and you're fired in the pandemic, and I don't even know what the word pandemic was at that time. The world was all it was all so uncertain, and then out of that, you find that silver lining, and I find this like what I feel is like my forever home in TNA.
Definitely. I feel like as a fan and a consumer, the Impact and TNA roster fits what Brian Myers is so much better than maybe the WWE system. I feel like you fit your groove so much better in TNA than you even like got the chance to in WWE, if that makes sense.
I always say talent is nothing without opportunity, and TNA for the past 5+ years, my talent has been given a boatload of opportunity,
Yeah,
more than I could ever imagine. So, ultimately, we're all artists, right? We want to create. Nobody does this and doesn't love wrestling and loves sitting on the bench. No, you just want to get in there and be involved. And I couldn't be more involved in TNA. And so that's what keeps me going. That's what keeps me happy.
definitely. You brought up Tommy Dreamer. I have to assume growing up from New York. Uh, that Tommy was somebody you paid a lot of attention to, whether it was in ECW, whether other places. What's it like now for you to be able to work alongside him for so many years and him be a mentor of yours?
Like I said, he's my wrestling dad. Of course, I mean, I grew up a diehard ECW guy. Anybody that's a big fan of mine knows that that's like my be all end all is ECW. And Tommy's always been the heart and soul of ECW. I always thought it was his career was very special. Like, I thought it was very admirable that he never wrestled as a heel, that kind of stuff that you just don't see anymore. It's almost like a guy in a sporting team playing on the same team his whole career, like things like that you just don't see anymore. And Tommy embodied that ECW spirit. His feud with Ravens, probably my favorite feud or storyline, if you will, in wrestling history. Just the levels of it and stuff. I think it's just so cool, and that's what we do. We tell stories, and that thing is they're still telling that story when they see each other do something. So and Tommy, I think Tommy's career on screen obviously has been pretty special, but behind the scenes, there's so much more even of what he's done to give back to wrestling. I think at the end of the day, like when he's done, that's what people are going to be talking about when they talk about Tommy Dreamer more so than the guy that had matches in ECW and WWE.
Of course. Jumping back to TNA talk, kind of. You were there during the transition from Impact back to TNA. What were some of the biggest things that were shifted, maybe backstage or even on screen, for talent and personnel within the company?
Honestly, nothing. And it's just I I would say this at the time. I don't know why that when we just tried to be Impact, the name just didn't stick. I don't know.
Yeah.
There's something about the TNA, those three letters that clicks with wrestling fans and they know it and love it. And it was like kind of going against the grain to not be that in the first place. So really like we were already have assembled this awesome roster. We were already having kick-ass shows. Things were already like ticking onward and upward. But instead of people going, "What's Impact?" You go, "Oh, now we're TNA." They go, "Oh, TNA." Like wrestling fans just know. So I was all for that change, and it really did, especially that announcement felt so exciting. And we're going on over 2 years of that now. Looking back on it, what a great decision, And I think that was a pivotal moment in the upswing that you're seeing right now in the TNA brand.
Definitely. I mean, and that upswing ultimately ended up to this amazing TNA slash AMC deal. What was your response, and like, what was the overwhelming response from everybody else when you guys heard that you were going to be showcased on a TV network like AMC?
Just pure excitement. I mean, when Carl Silva came in a year ago, he said that's his number one goal. And I texted him. I said, once we announced the deal, I said, hey, you're a man of your word. You did what you said you're going to do, and you got us on an epic channel that everyone knows and has. And it's not a knock on Access, but back to what I was saying about being called Impact, you say Access, it follows up with a little explaining. It's a channel that's on some, some people might have it, you might not. You say AMC, everyone knows what you're talking about. Everyone has it, and we're fired up to be a part of it. I mean, it's the biggest platform that TNA has ever been a part of, and it's a crazy exciting time.
I recently had Santino on and we talked about it. And I told him it's probably a bigger network than even Spike. I know Spike
I
back in the day
agree,
was a huge deal, but AMC has all these, blockbuster shows that we've watched for the last 20 plus years. So like
big
getting
time.
on there is just so recognizable and definitely changes the game as
I
far
also
as
think the
like,
uniqueness of being a live sport on that channel
yes,
is pretty freaking cool too. When there's nothing else like that, it's not like we're competing with other stuff in our space. I think that's really cool.
which definitely could set you apart and maybe gives the expectation of, getting a higher rating or a higher uh, ranking on that platform because there's nothing else on AMC like it. So it's definitely
It'd be
set you guys
cool.
apart.
That's
Do
the
you have
goal.
any do you have any idea or expectation of what we can expect January 15th on the debut episode of Impact?
Well, we're live. We have a couple awesome matches already announced, including Santana and Frankie Kazarian for the World Championship. Live is what's the real selling point there, right? You know a couple things, but live TV is live TV. Anything could happen. And I just encourage anyone who's curious or hasn't seen TNA in a long time to please check it out, and they won't be disappointed.
You bring up live TV, which somebody like you've spent years in the WWE, you understand what the live aspects like. And I know
Mhm.
TNA's done here and there live shows recently. Has that been something that maybe younger roster members or roster members who haven't done live TV before have struggled to transition with, or what's that been like?
Of course, it's not easy, and I always tell my wrestling students like these are kind of things you need in your tool belt. If you're going to be a successful professional wrestler, you have to be able to hit your times and work for live TV and not, throw up the middle finger back in a moment of heated moment, things like that. There's a ton of little things that go into it that become big things. We have been doing, kind of live reps, if you will, to get prepared for the biggest moment, which is January 15th. So I think, for sure there's, green members of the roster that are not used to this. And then there's people like me, been doing this for 20 years. But I think we're all super excited and very prepared for it. So I'm not too concerned about that.
I love it. I love it so much. Something incredible that's also been connected with TNA is the kind of WWE partnership that's been going on for quite some time now. What have what have been your thoughts and feelings for the kind of cross promotional warfare, as we could call it, between TNA and NXT?
I love it. I think it's just like it adds to super exciting television. You never know who's going to be where, doing what, pop up at any time. Um, I don't like for me as a wrestling fan, I think that's a super fun layer to whatever television show I'm watching. So who wouldn't be thrilled about that? Kind of almost
Definitely.
like fantasy matchups that are happening in real life, things that kids only do with action figures, you're getting to see play out in real time. And I think like it's just a win for both brands across the board.
Kind of speaking of fantasy matches, I guess, is there anyone on that NXT roster that makes you want to cross the line over to NXT and have a match against that you haven't?
I'd like to have a real. I've wrestled him, but not like on a big platform. I'd love to wrestle All Ego Ethan Page because we're pretty close friends, and I think he's very very talented. But I wouldn't mind you know getting after it with him. I think it would be great.
I think it'd be cool to see you holding that North American title too.
That sounds too, but I have to it's good too, but I have to take all that Canadian stuff off of it.
Yeah, of course, of course.
Yeah,
We don't need that.
no, not at all.
Um, for the last few years, you've been a part of the system. How did joining them kind of change the trajectory of your career?
For sure. Change things. Like I tell people all the time, the system has been working and clicking because it's real. We were the system behind the scenes long before we were the system on your television set because we were all just real life best buds that hang out and BS all day long. And I think Tommy Dreamer was taking a note of that and just said, "Why don't we put this on television?" So, which anytime in wrestling, you're already doing what you love. When you get to be out there with the people you love and having fun, it's crazy, man. I feel like when I go to work, I'm not even working. It's almost ridiculous to think I get paid to do what I do sometimes, especially in this era of my career because I'm having so much fun with my friends and we've been very much in the thick of things. We won Faction of the Year for 2025, which I'm super proud of. 2 years strong, and ultimately, I think when it started, you don't know what the system's going to be, but I think all of our goal was like we don't want to be one of those factions that lasts for 2 or 3 months and is forgotten. We're a trivia question or something. At the end of the day, we wanted to really cement our place in like TNA history, and I think we're well on our way to do that.
You're definitely doing that, 100%. And I think at Genesis, a chapter of the system book is getting closed. JDC has announced that he is retiring after his match at Genesis. Uh, what were your feelings when you heard that? And what can we expect maybe out of yourself and the system come Genesis?
It's so ironic as much as I'm like excited and looking forward to AMC and the debut and being in Dallas. I'm also kind of I don't know if I'm dreading Dango's retirement or it just because it's all very real. He's one of my best friends. Him and Eddie, I've known him 20 years. Eddie's known him even longer. They're going to have a very emotional match, like truly emotional. You don't need, it's not even something that, I have to pretend and psych myself up for to be a character. It's just going to be real and play out in front of everybody. So it's going to be special. I'm glad that he made the decision to, that he was done and he's giving us, his colleagues and the fans a chance to honor him and say goodbye properly. Most guys just kind of they get hurt and then never wrestle again, and you don't even know it's their last match. So I think it's really cool that we'll all have this opportunity to, appreciate him and let him know how much we love him. But yeah, it's just going to be very emotional and definitely a different, there's some, banger matches on Genesis for sure, if you will. But this one is going to be very different than the other ones for sure.
It's definitely, I feel like looking at the card so far, it's the one to pay attention to. It's got the
It's
most
it, it's just going to
emotion
be the
behind
most
it.
unique. I'd say it would
Yes,
be the most unique in that card for sure.
definitely. Just speaking of the system, you brought up Faction of the Year for 2025. Do you have any expectations for what we get out of the system in 2026? Whether that's more championships, whether that's Faction of the Year again. Like, what do you got? What's the goal, the aim?
I mean, the goal is always championships, but really to just be all over your television screens on AMC for sure. Anytime we're visible, I think is a win for the system. We're contemplating maybe adding a new member or two. That'll be something interesting to look forward to in 2026. Do we replace Dango or not? It's on the table as a possibility. And there's a lot of awesome talent, obviously, on the TNA roster that could suffice, if that were a thing. So just excitement, man. Just to be on AMC and be doing what we're doing at such a high level. It's all good.
Of course. One more question, then I'll let you go. Matt Cardona just made his return as Matt Cardona in WWE. Did you know Matt was going to make the jump over to SmackDown?
I may have had a little inkling, yes.
What was
Very top
the
secret, but I was probably one of a handful of people that were in the know of this.
how did you feel seeing your buddy back, where he's fought to go back to for the last 5 years?
Ecstatic. Anytime you see a friend accomplish a goal, that they've been pining for, especially when in the same industry you're in, right? It's like we talked about it on our show, the Major Wrestling Figure Podcast, that it's Matt never took no for an answer. No is only no if you accept it and don't, you stop trying. He never stopped trying. So it's almost like comical, but commendable. His first contract with WWE, he got signed at 20 years old, and now his second, he's 40 years old. So just goes to prove to you, like, everybody's story is different, and no is only no if you believe it and stop trying. And Matt certainly never stopped. So I think all wrestlers, young and old, should take a look at his story and be inspired by it. And you know that what he did is really something special. So, and I'm thrilled for him. He gets to work with his wife. I think it's epically cool that the Major Wrestling Figure podcast is represented by three guys in all three major companies in pro wrestling. And it's all out of love for the business. So it's a beautiful thing.
It's rare that you get um that kind of connection from three different platforms that sometimes agree, sometimes don't agree, but you guys, all three together, bring that love in wrestling, which I think obviously the name of the podcast here is the I Love Wrestling Podcast. It's all about the love of the game. So I'm
Right.
glad that you guys get to share that unity. And I'm excited to see what not only yourself does in 2026, but what the system and TNA brings in 2026.
Thanks, man. I
Um,
can't encourage people enough to check us out. Like, if you haven't seen TNA in a while, give it a shot, man. I think it's gonna really impress you. If you're a wrestling fan, it's for you.
of course. Everybody stay tuned for TNA on AMC January 15th. Thank you, Brian, and I'm looking forward to the next time.
Thank you, man.